Now we will be discussing about the last of the administrative tasks. In the earlier lessons, we have dealt with how a digital library should be organized, and later we have also discussed about the people that are associated with a digital repository. Now we will look into the process of self-archiving. So, what are the various steps in self-archiving a document to a digital repository? In this, we go step by step from workflow 1, workflow 2, workflow 3. Now, the workflow in DSpace is similar to that of reviewing process of journals with a few differences. Just you keep in mind how authors submit to a journal. For example, author submits his publication to a journal, the editor or the editorial board or the secretarial staff send it to the reviewers who are dealing in particular with that area. Then the journal, after reviewing process, probably depending on the journal policy, whether at least 3 reviewers should accept or at least 2 reviewers should accept, finally it may be accepted, or sometimes the reviewers may ask the author to modify the publication, or in some cases they may reject the publication outright. Similar to that, here also in DSpace we have more or less the same workflow with a few differences. In essence, an author submits his work to the digital repository. All reviewers get email alert about the submission. One of the reviewers informs the outcome of the review to the author. In the submission, if the submission receives acceptance, metadata editors get email alert. One of the editors makes required corrections. Probably the metadata editors can only correct the metadata. Then submission gets a handle, that is unique ID, and immediately the metadata gets indexed, then it is made available in the repository. So, let us go more into detail of the submission workflow process 1. An author submits an item, enters metadata and uploads the digital item. I think in the following lessons we will elaborately explain how to enter the metadata, upload a document and all that. Then displays a message to the submitter saying the item is under review process. Then all the reviewers of the collection will receive an email alert informing about the submission. So, who are the reviewers is decided by the administrator. So, administrator, depending on the expertise of some of the members of the repository, he may decide, okay, these are the reviewers for this particular collection, as they are the subject experts of the topic of the collection. A reviewer may click the URL of the submission. So, once he receives the email, he can open the email and he will see a hyperlink stating that the following author has submitted this particular digital document titled this, and if you wish to review, you may click the URL. Or alternatively, there is one more, even if the reviewer has not seen the email, but whenever he logs in to DSpace, he will have a task pool informing you have a task to attend to. There he will find, okay, so and so article has been submitted, and you please go through the article and decide whether it should be accepted or not. So, the reviewer may click the URL. Reviewer has to log in, even then, okay, it only takes you to the reviewer to the DSpace screen to see the submission in the task pool. So, it is the task pool which contains all the submissions that are to be reviewed. So, he can read the digital item. So, he can open the digital item whether it is a picture or an article or any multimedia document. He may approve it, or he may reject and ask for ask for modifications. Or if he feels that either he does not have time or he is not particularly an expert to make a final decision on the particular submission, what he can do is he can send it back to the task pool so that the other reviewers may review the publication. Once it is approved or rejected, email alert will be sent to the metadata people. Okay. So, if it is approved, it goes to the metadata editors. If it is rejected, it goes to the author. That is the just the workflow process. If one of the reviewers completes the task, DSpace removes the submission information from the task pool. Yeah, here it is the major difference between the journal reviewing process and DSpace reviewing process. In a journal review process, if 3 reviewers are identified, all of them have to go through the publication and leave their comments or leave their decision whether it should be accepted or rejected or modified. But in case of DSpace, the process is slightly different. That is, if one of the reviewers takes a decision of rejection or modification or acceptance, the other reviewers practically have no chance to review the publication. This is a very peculiar situation. I do not know whether in future DSpace would try to mimic more the journal review process, or it prefers to retain its own procedure of reviewing. So, though the other reviewers get an email alert, the task pool would be empty for others if a person reviews, if he has already, if one of them has already reviewed. That means only one person can review, though there are many reviewers. Perhaps in DSpace it may not be the case that only 3 reviewers are sent, as in the case of journals. In the reviewers E group, there may be many people as reviewers, and all of them will get email alert. Though the DSpace removes the submission from the task pool of other reviewers once it has been already reviewed by one of its members in the E group, it cannot get back the email. That is the case with normal email process also. For example, I jokingly say that if I write a nasty letter to my boss, immediately I realized, oh, this I may risk my job. Is there any way to get back the mail? There is no way. So, once the die is cast, the email is gone. But if the review process was over by one of the reviewers, perhaps the task pool would be empty for the other reviewers when they log in. This is the major difference between the journal review process and DSpace review process. So, reviewing, though other reviewers, as I told already, the other reviewers have no empty task pool. So, it does not, many people feel that the open access journals have less quality, whereas commercial journals have more quality. Okay. The problem is it does not depend on the commercial or government or open access. In India, I have a feeling that many people thoroughly believe government organizations, they do not work efficiently, whereas private organizations work efficiently. My personal belief is everywhere it is the same people, whether it is in India or abroad. So, it does not depend on the commercial aspect of it, or government, open, free and all that. These are, I think, some of the myths we entertain. Though Dublin Core is meant for non-librarians, the next process is metadata editing. though Dublin Core is meant for non-librarians, there can be some mistakes in metadata entered by authors. It is true that compared to Mark XML or its I think parent, that is Mark 21, Mark 21 has, if you count the elements and sub-elements or fields or sub-fields, it comes to more than 1000 fields to be entered, which I think only the library community with the nuances of cataloging they can fill in, but otherwise Mark 21 definitely scares ordinary users. That is the biggest disadvantage the Mark 21 has. In fact, my personal feeling, it has slowed down the entire library automation process with lots of information to be entered. But in any case, Dublin Core is basically meant for authors for self-archiving purpose. It is much modeled on the lines of references given by authors at the end of each of their publications, which are terse and very brief, but we never had any problem that the information given by any author in any domain or any subject is insufficient to locate the document. We never had the problem. So I think that was the basic philosophy behind Dublin Core for its simplicity, and it is working wonders. Okay. In fact, many people consider Dublin Core as the lowest common denominator of metadata schema. That means the elements are core elements and they are essential in every schema, whether it is Mark XML or MARTS or any other metadata schema for bibliographic description. So in spite of its simplicity, still authors may enter some mistakes, something like there could be spelling mistakes or missing words or something like that, or entering information in the wrong fields. Okay. For example, last name and first name of authors would always be confusing. Of course, for the author it may not be, but for many people it is, depending on the culture they belong to. So another this one is the choice of subject descriptors. For example, depending on the collection, whether it belongs to medicine, for example, probably the digital library administrators prefer medical subject headings rather than natural language medical terms. Or in case of other subjects also, there are many subject headings they may follow, whether Sears or some other subject headings. So it is very important the metadata is entered correctly, so that after all it is metadata that is indexed, and the people have to search by the words that are entered in the metadata. So workflow 3, once metadata editor enters the item, email will be sent to collection administrator. As we discussed earlier, collection administrators may not appear in all the cases of digital repository, unless the repository is a very large repository or a repository of a large organization. Then only the administrator decides to create collection administrator and relegate some of the tasks which he normally does to each collection administrator. That means collection administrator have to decide who are the reviewers, who are the metadata people among the members of the digital repository. So in the workflow 3, if collection administrators are present, once metadata is approved, the email will be sent to the collection administrators. Finally, collection administrators have to decide whether a particular submission should be included in the repository or not. But again, just like metadata editors, collection administrators are also normally are not supposed to reject an item. Okay. So metadata editors cannot reject and collection administrators may not reject, because rejection and acceptance of a particular submission is the prerogative of the reviewers. So, workflow options, the entire workflow is optional. That means one can have reviewers, metadata editors, collection administrators, or if somebody decides not to have any reviewers or metadata editors, in the workflow the administrator can decide just the moment it is submitted by authorized users, it goes into the digital collection. Or even in extreme cases, though many people may not prefer, rather nobody would prefer, even submission can be anonymous. That means the administrator decides anybody can submit, just as anybody can read, access and download a submission, anybody can submit. But again, the problem with this kind of too much openness is some mischievous people may submit wrong submissions to wrong collections, or even unacceptable submissions to a particular collection. So, whether the administrator wants to have one or none or more workflow processes depends on the policy of the digital repository. So, he has to decide how many editors reviewers he wants to choose, how many metadata people he wants to choose, how many collection administrators he wants to choose, whether they should be there at all is the prerogative of the administrator, which depends on the policy of the digital repository. So, as I told you, the extreme case is anonymous submission, which is very open, but perhaps the worst case. So, in case of small repositories, the administrators can combine reviewing and metadata editing to one or more e-persons or to a e-group. So, you know that in some of the libraries, probably some of the tasks of the library are assigned to a single person. So, that means he may be doing a kind of multitasking by a single person in a library. So, he is the cataloger, he is the classifier, and he is the issuing person and all that. Just as similar to that, in DSpace also, if you wish, while creating a collection, the administrator can decide whether he wants to combine reviewing and metadata editing to a particular person or a particular e-group, or even that means he can combine the workflow 1 and 2 to a particular one person. That means whenever submission takes place, then the reviewer has to not only do the reviewing process, he has to do the metadata editing process. But if in case of large libraries, probably these two tasks will be divided across 2 e-persons or 2 e-groups. Now, so again I would like to emphasize the difference between a journal publication and the digital repository. In case of journal articles, the policy may be having 2 or more reviewers reviewing the submission, and the journal policy may prescribe that at least 2 or more reviewers should accept the submission. But in case of DSpace, any of the reviewers either approves or rejects submission, the other reviewers will not have a chance to make any decision, as the submission will be withdrawn from the review workflow or from the task pool. So, in conclusion, it is the reviewers and reviewing policy that ensures the quality of a journal. Here I would like to tell you one of my experiences. I went to a laboratory where they do a little classified research. They have been doing one experiment and they were not successful at all. Unfortunately, as it is a classified research, they cannot ask any peers in the same field, okay, how to conduct this experiment. But the trick they played is they have carried out the experiment and prepared an article on what the methodology and the process they followed in conducting the experiment, and wrote an article and sent it to a journal. So, when one of the reviewers, obviously a subject expert, told them, no, this is not correct, because in this method we also tried, we did not achieve the result. In fact, we tried various other methods. Finally, we found there is only one method, and this is the method. So, they have taken the reviewers' comments and conducted the experiment and finally got the results. So, that means it is the reviewers that ensure the quality of the publication, not the whether it is a government or a open access or a free journal or subscription based or highly priced journal does not mean that the articles would be highly ranked or very good articles. So, my appeal to the people is subscribe, not only subscribe to open access journals, submit to open access journals. In fact, to prove the quality of the journals, some of the Nobel laureates joined the editorial boards of open access journals, because they know that it is the reviewers that guarantee the quality, because after all the journal publishing industry is only a commercial person and may not have any knowledge of the various subjects he is publishing the journals. So, whether it is a repository or a journal, it is ensured. That is why at times I have been advocating that in future not only the journals to be ranked, impact factors and other things are to be calculated, perhaps even repository impact factors and citation analysis and other things are to be conducted on the various repositories to reflect the image of the repository. This is very essential to promote the open access journals and to strengthen open access repositories. So, in conclusion, the DSpace is reviewing process or submission process is slightly different, but basically modeled on the process of journals. With that, I conclude.